Hey you guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria Evans. I'm a science-based intuitive eating specialist helping you stop food fear, food guilt, self-sabotage, and binge eating so you can eat effortlessly and feel amazing. I'm really excited for this video today because we're digging into 5 tips to help you stop binge eating during the holidays. Now, before we dig into it, I wanted to let you know I actually wrote 10 tips, but became so long, such a long video that I actually decided to cut it down to 5. This means that I've actually written a blog with those other 5 tips. So after you watch this video, go ahead to the description below, click on that link, and you can read the rest of the 5 tips that I wasn't able to cover here today. So my first tip to help you stop binge eating during the holidays is to schedule notifications on your phone with comforting phrases that come up. So what you want to do specifically is to go to your phone and go to your clock on your phone. Go to your alarms, and where it says the word alarm, where it has that label, I want you to X out of that, and I want you to write instead some kind of a comforting phrase. So maybe that is take a breath, you're doing great, slow down, how are you feeling? What do I need for myself, right? Just something that kind of pattern interrupts that moment, because so often we get so in our head, right? We find ourselves moving towards foods and feeling a bit out of body almost. So what we want to do is pattern interrupt to bring ourselves back into our body, right? Take that moment to kind of check in with ourselves and notice when we're starting to spiral into that binge eating type of mindset and do something to bring us back to ourselves. Because our phone is something we have on us all the time, or maybe that's just me, it's a great tool to be able to schedule in these notifications and these silent alarms. Another key point, make sure they're silent. The point of this is not to scare yourself, right? So schedule these alarms several times throughout the day, especially if you know that you're going to some kind of an event, right? It could even have a little alarm on it with sound. If you're at a party, a holiday gathering, it's in your pocket, you don't want to miss it, right? It can be an opportunity for you to have that coming up on your screen, reminding yourself to breathe, check in, see what's coming up for you, see what's going on before it escalates into something a little bit more. So on that phone, right, those labels, how am I feeling? I am safe, breathe, whatever those little things are on those silent alarms on your phone, or it can have sound to it, obviously, if you're wanting a prompt that maybe fits in your pocket and you're not going to notice it, that kind of thing. But this is a really great reminder during the holidays to check in, breathe, right, before it escalates into something more. This is also a great tool to be using outside of Christmas, outside of the holidays, all the time, creating that consistency of checking in with yourself so it doesn't get to the end of the day, you've realized you've not met any of your needs. In my coaching, I talk about the 4 types of unmet needs, right? So you get to the end of the day, we haven't met any of those needs, and then we find ourselves binge eating as a result to try to meet those needs, right? And so this is a super simple tool. Try it out. Do it right now so you don't forget. Schedule a few in throughout the day, or if you're going to an event or a dinner or something, schedule in maybe some more before, after, all that kind of thing. See what kind of phrases and things resonate with you. Switch up the timing of them. So if you always have the timer going off or the alarm going off at 11 a.m., right? Don't always have it at just 11 a.m. Change it around so it doesn't become something you just start to glaze over, as well as making sure that you're changing whatever that little sentence is, right? Whatever that prompt is. Because if it's always, breathe at 11 a.m., for example, again, we're going to start to just ignore that. So you want to be changing it up, switching it up so you can always be seeing it using it as a way to check in with yourself. The second binge eating tip for the holidays for you is to realize the foods that you've made off limits at these holiday events, holiday dinners, holiday season, those off limit foods are the reasons why you want them so badly. If you are finding that you are having a hard time controlling yourself around certain foods, this is a pretty good indicator that you have been restricting it. We feel out of control around the foods that we have made off limits to ourselves. So if we are mentally restricting, if we are emotionally restricting, if we are physically restricting, if we are connection restricting, right? All different types of restriction I talk about in my coaching, right? So for example, physically, if we're not eating enough food throughout the day, right? Our calories, aka our energy is too low. Mentally, if we're telling ourselves this food is off limits, I am not allowed to have this food, right? That type of restriction basically sets you up to have that type of pendulum swing, that type of response where you end up eating more of it. What I always say is that mental restriction creates mental rebellion and allowance creates space for choice. So something to consider when you're going into, the holiday season is that making foods off limits, telling yourself you can't have that food makes you want it 10 times more, right? It's like telling a little kid, you can't have this thing. Well, now they really want it, right? It's like it's your brain is responding in the exact same way. So work with your brain, work with the power of abundance and permission instead of restriction and off limits. And with that, you'll be able to make some powerful choices around your relationship with food. So take this holiday season as a learning opportunity to reintroduce these once off limits foods into your life in order for them to lose their power over you. Right? If they're just foods, if they're just things we are allowed to have, they lose their excitement, they lose their novelty. And all of a sudden, once it's no longer scarcity and restriction, but rather abundance and permission, then we can start to choose to have those foods instead of feeling like we have to have those foods because our brain is responding as a result of restriction. Tip number 3 is grounding yourself if you're noticing yourself starting to spiral. So we can help combat that stress and anxiety and all of that by bringing yourself back into the present moment. So if you're noticing that you're starting to have that kind of tunnel vision around binge eating, almost that irritability of needing to get that food, this is a great opportunity to practice this. You can do this by grounding yourself by using whatever is around you. This is a very popular technique for grounding yourself. So for example, something like see if you can spot 10 Christmas decorations, or count all the red ornaments on the tree, or pick something that's in your environment and then count whatever that number is. So maybe it's people in the room, maybe it's like I said, holiday ornaments, maybe it's cups left out on the counter, if your kitchen's a current mess like mine is, right? Whatever that thing is. But when we're counting, when we're focusing our brain on something in our current environment, it brings us back to the present moment. Binging and spiraling is often that kind of anxious, excitement, fear, all that, really that kind of future anticipation of reward, right? I've talked in my other binge eating videos. Stress is the anticipation of pain, right? And dopamine, the hit that we get from it, is the anticipation of reward. So when we're binging, and that's that stress and as well as that dopamine, that excitement for the food, it's that bit of a mix of the anticipation of pain that we don't want to have, right? Whatever be the pain from one of those types of restrictions, so not eating enough food or telling ourselves it's off limits, our brain is essentially trying to avoid whatever that pain, whatever that unmet need is, right? Combining that with the fact that our body wants that dopamine, that anticipation of reward, that feel good from that food, it's basically moving us into the future to try to avoid some kind of a pain, right? So what we want to do is bring ourselves back to the present moment, telling our body like, hey, we're safe, hey, we're okay, hey, we're here now. If we're counting ornaments, if we're looking at snowman or counting, whatever that thing is in our current environment, grounding ourselves tells ourselves, hey, we're safe, right? Combining that with a couple of deep breaths, basically understanding that if we are breathing deep into our low belly, it basically signals to our brain that we are not in danger, right? If we're running away from this hypothetical lion, if our brain is, or if our brain is responding as if there's a threat in our environment because our brain is not evolved to understand it's, the 21st century, not thousands of years ago, right? So if we're breathing calmly deep into the low belly, it's almost like when we smile and our body starts to release those happy hormones. Similarly, when we are breathing in that way, it tells our body, hey, we are safe, right? It triggers that vagus nerve, puts us into that parasympathetic state so that we feel more safe, more relaxed, right? More in our body. So all that to say, doing a grounding technique to bring us back to the present moment is super powerful. All right, tip number 4 is to not restrict the next day. So you're human, which means there's a good chance you're going to eat a little bit more foods than you'd wanted to at some kind of event or holiday party. The important thing is that you don't try to compensate and restrict the next day, because this kicks off what is known as the binge restrict cycle. So if we are, we had more the night before, we binge the night before, and the next morning we're skipping breakfast, or we're eating very small quantities for breakfast and lunch, or, whatever that thing is, that is not a solution. That is the problem. Right? Our brain does not like scarcity, does not like thinking there's not enough food availability, which means you're going to get to a point where your hunger starts to take over and then it's going to send you into a binge. Binging, a way that we can combat it is by regular, consistent eating that is not restrictive, right? Permission and allowance removes that kind of rebellious eating more as a way to try to help our body realize like, hey, there is no famine. Hey, there is not a problem with food availability. So remove the restriction the next day. Your body knows exactly how to regulate. You don't need to do it for it, right? Our hypothalamus, which is kind of like the thermostat of our brain, knows how to regulate our leptin, our ghrelin, our hunger fullness hormones, our metabolism, our desire to move our body. Like we have a built-in regulation system. We don't need to do it for ourselves, right? So if I ate way too much the night before, I might not be as hungry for breakfast the next day. Right? That doesn't mean I should not eat anything at all, but I'm maybe not going to have the big breakfast that I maybe normally would have. So something to remember, our body is naturally going to play with our levels of hunger and fullness, and we don't have to do it for us. So if we're feeling hungry, eat. Don't try to compensate, because your body is going to have a kind of backlash, rebellious as in it's helping you, response. And so you don't want to be putting yourself into that state, because that's when you start to feel out of control around food. So don't restrict the next day. If you did find that you binged the night before, ate more than you needed to, eat regularly, eat consistently, honor those hunger cues, and that's how you break out of that binge restrict cycle, when specifically when it's related to the physical restriction, right? The physical as an unmet need of not eating enough food. So if you want to stop that binge eating cycle, one of the first ways is to meet that unmet need of not getting enough food, right? So not restricting the next day, making sure that our body has enough energy, right, in order for us not to kick into that kind of primal eating, because our body does not like when there's restriction, when there's not enough food around, because our body's responding as if it's some kind of a famine. So don't restrict the next day, eat consistently so that your body feels safe, doesn't feel like it has to try to get more food in as a way to make up for those calories that weren't eaten, and know that your body can take care of you. All right, tip number 5 is to have a plan to swerve diet talk. So unfortunately, the holidays are a prime time for people talking about diets and weight change and, I didn't have anything to eat today, so now I can have these cookies, or, I was so good, or I was so, whatever those things are. These lines, these sentences, these phrases that people are saying can be extremely triggering, right? I know if I'm out, for example, for lunch and someone says, oh man, I can't even finish this. It's way too big of a meal for me, or whatever. And I finish it. There's a second of like, I finished that whole thing, right? Now, obviously I'm at a place where it doesn't bother me, but those types of sentences, whether it be at a holiday party or, really anything, causes you to have a feeling of shame, a feeling of judgment around your body, around food. So being aware that this diet talk can be super triggering and can send us into a bit of a spiral, sometimes a binge eating spiral. So having a few one-liners kind of prepped for when people start to talk about diets and restriction and permission, and I'm so naughty and I'm so bad, and I shouldn't have done this, and all of that type of polarizing, negative, toxic, language around your relationship with food and their relationship with food. We want to find out how we can swerve that. So saying things like, oh, I'm actually on a self-love journey where I'm challenging myself to not talk about dieting or weight or calories, and I'd really love your support with this. Right? That's a super simple, super powerful one-liner to help you kind of swerve that diet talk, so you don't get into the territory of shaming and judging yourself and comparing yourself, because that is not a healthy place to be when it comes to creating a healthy relationship with food. So those are my 5 tips for binge eating during the holidays, but I also want to remind you I have 5 more tips in a blog post. So for you to check that out, for you to read that, head below to the video description and click on that link to read it there. Additionally, before you go, I wanted to let you know that I'm releasing a video next week all about holiday weight gain. So if that's something you want to learn more about, then I invite you to hit the subscribe button, as well as the like button on this video, as well as a comment below letting me know what types of things you want me to talk about in relation to weight gain during the holidays, so I can make sure the video is catered to you. Finally, I wanted to let you know that I am also having a free community that is coming super soon. I know I've been talking about it for a little while now, but we really are getting close to perfecting it. And I wanted to make sure it's the best it can absolutely be. So again, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you're joining and following along so I can let you know when we're releasing and you can be a part of this absolutely incredible community. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I hope that it was useful. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do let me know in the comments, subscribe, all of that. It means the world to me. And yeah, until next week, I hope you have an amazing day and we'll talk soon.